I wanted to come and speak on the subject of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Its impact on society, how it affects us, what it is, of course, originally in the first place, and how it's affected us on a global scale in recent years. And for those that have woken up to the truth, having recognised what cognitive dissonance was and having attempted to communicate some truths to friends and family and watched the shutters go down, like literally saw their eyes misting over and they're not focused anymore. The way people were responding. It was very clever the way they would set up this information of confirmation bias, of propaganda, of fear-based news items, of trying to make the collective become the police for everybody else, so we police ourselves.
Absolutely.
Because that's you peeling back those layers.
Yeah.
And it's trauma, it's anxiety, it's stress. So like a zit that you're bursting, it has to come to the surface.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So, welcome to the Drake Michigan podcast. Today we have shamanic practitioner, magic practitioner, healer, astrologer, and the amazing Chris Nicolson with us today. Thank you for coming all the way from Scotland today as well. Thank you, Chris, for coming. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ant. Thanks for having me.
It's amazing.
Glad to be here.
You got in touch with me a little while ago. I mean, we got to know each other a little bit last year, didn't we, at one of the festivals, Carry On Camping last year. And you got in touch when we started doing our podcast and said you would like to come on the show because we want to talk about, well, why don't you explain? You know, you've been through in your early life a situation that you needed to break out of.
Yes.
And I think it would help a lot of people actually to talk about it.
Yeah, I've seen stuff happen in the last 3 years since the year that wasn't.
Yes.
And it's been very reminiscent of my early journey. It's almost like the flavour was the same, the smell was the same.
Yeah.
Just the specifics of the circumstance was slightly different and on a much grander scale.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I contacted you was because I wanted to come and speak on the subject of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Its impact on society, how it affects us, what it is, of course, originally in the first place, and how it's affected us on a global scale in recent years. And for those that have woken up to the truth,
Yeah.
How it's affected them, their family, their relationships,
Yeah.
and hopefully give a little bit of insight as to how, for those of us who've been living with this exact scenario for 30 years,
Yeah.
how we've approached it, how we cope with it, and strategies to help people break out of that.
Okay.
So that's my intention. My background is I was raised in a cult.
Yeah.
I was born into and brought up in a Christian fundamentalist cult. And I've never been a conformist. It's all written in my stars. So I was never destined to last very long in it. Just long enough to have the experiences that I needed to get.
Yeah.
I went through quite a lot of trauma and abuse, specifically as a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old.
Right.
Quite an extended period of psychological abuse as I was excommunicated from the cult as a 13-year-old, very publicly, was at the public meeting where I was announced. And from that point on, my whole community had to send me to Coventry.
Oh, wow.
So I was isolated. I've often described it as being on an island in a sea of people.
Yeah.
And I was very much alone on that island. I was dragged along to the church by my very zealous stepfather, who was quite a pious man and wanted, of course, to show that his way of ruling the roost at home was a demonstration of his piety to rule the flock.
Okay.
And so he took it out on me. I was a black mark on his name. So for 2.5 years, I went through a very public trauma where I was taken to the church twice a week and nobody would communicate with me. They weren't allowed to. So I was sat in a chair. Yeah. From 13 to 15 and a half.
Wow.
And then the governing body of the church changed the rules. They got I think it would have been a fax from God at the time. It was before emails. But they got some notification from their higher being that said, if you haven't been baptized, we can't kick you out. and I had been kicked out as an unbaptized person. And so they changed the rules.
Right. Okay.
And just without apologising for my sins, my sin was smoking.
Oh, was it? Is that what you were kicked out for?
I got caught smoking cigarettes, and then I denied it. I wouldn't admit it, and I wouldn't apologise. I wouldn't repent for my sins.
Okay.
And so they excommunicated me. Then when the rules were changed and a dictate was put out that unbaptized people could not be kicked out, suddenly everyone could speak to me, and they love-bombed me. And so, having gone through 2.5 years of living a very alternative life, and actually a split life, there would be one where I'm on the peripheries of the cult, and this other one where I'm on the peripheries of society, because I couldn't commit enough time in my mad schedule to be a good friend to just regular people. And also in the school that I went to, there was a lot of people from my community who had moved to that area. So there were lots of other cult kids in my school who were reporting back on my actions.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So then at 15 and a half, they love-bombed me. I joined back in, looking for community, having gone through these very formative years in this
I can imagine,
very isolated space.
Yeah.
So I threw myself back into it, and a few months later I got baptised. They were very much pushing for this, and this was a way for me to wipe the black mark off my name. But that was impossible. I had been used as a stick to beat for other parents to beat their children with. Behave or you'll end up like Chris. Look at what he is.
Nice.
And they told their kids I had a demon inside me. I was possessed. Okay. Some of these kids have sought me out in recent years to apologise for their participation in the shunning that I went through, and explained the details of what happened.
Were you getting any backing from your parents at that point? I know you're saying your stepdad was in such a way religiously. What was your mum like with you at that point? Was she able to support you with love and compassion, or was that not happening either?
No, completely. I remember I was completely alone. I remember there was a moment standing in the hallway of their house, looking at their backs as they walked away from me into the main living room, having just said some stuff to me, and I'm left there standing looking at them walking away from me with a very clear realisation that, I'm on my own.
Wow, at 15?
13.
So I was 13. 13.
That was right at the start of the whole process.
Wow.
When they were, no, my mother, to this day, they they would cross the street to avoid.
Are they still in?
Yes.
That's okay.
Very much.
Yeah.
So I realised that actually the black mark was not getting wiped off my name, and I had a status that was indelibly imprinted upon the minds of the other community members within the cult and the greater, other congregations out with the one that I was in.
Yeah.
And so this rebel status was put upon me. And so beyond the initial love bombing, where I was invited to barbecues and to go bowling and so on, it kind of waned, because once that, sparkle effect wore off for them, I was only really intriguing to the naughty boys and the naughty girls.
Right.
Because I held this mystical kind of status with some of them, which has been interesting to learn years later. And so I started leading this double life again, that, I would sneak out of the house, sneak back in, stealing the next door neighbour's ladder so I could climb in the bedroom window, and because my stepdad would lock me out and things.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was interesting times. And then I got caught smoking again, exactly the same thing, age 17. I repeated the process of denying and not admitting to it. And so this time, being baptised, they were able to excommunicate me.
Get you out.
Yeah, so the process was identical, repeated again at 17. And within a few weeks, I had a bit of a set to with my stepdad. There was a bit of fisticuffs. And the following morning, I was unceremoniously told I think I had 2 weeks to leave, and I left that day. I just got some bags of stuff and left.
Did you feel that you're, because obviously you're not able to, at that age anyway, I don't think you will have done any kind of deep search within to kind of figure things out. I presume your self-defense is you would have been acting on your own adrenaline, survival mode, fight or flight.
Absolutely.
You are just reacting. So that's a really tough situation. You're only a kid. You're a baby.
Yes. All of those things that you said, it was very tough, a really difficult experience.
I bet.
I actually, looking back on it, it was like being carried by the tide of a strong river. I was just in the flow and being carried downstream and buffeted about, and thankfully I was a bit protected, as I learned much later.
Yeah.
But my spiritual journey, I mean, I think that was part of my spiritual journey. I know it was part, because it's part of the foundation stones of my education.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm strong now because of my journey.
Yes.
I'm very proud of those experiences, having, polished and faceted me in the way that I'm now quite proud to be. I'm still a dick at times, we all are, but I quite like the person I am, and I wouldn't be this man without that journey. So I'm grateful for it. I accept it.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I started meditating during those years.
Really? And what brought that to you?
Boredom, sitting in a church and trying to get out of that space.
So you were actually just naturally going into the space.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay.
And it wasn't until years later that someone said to me, "Oh, you should meditate."
I think I did that in the classroom all through my school,
right, Yeah. So loads of us did. So this guy said, "I'm going to teach you how to meditate." I was like, "Yeah, that'd be so good for me." And he said, this, and this. And I went, oh, I've been doing that for years. I just didn't have the vocabulary.
Yeah, sure.
There was no one in my sphere that could give me the words to teach me the understanding of this other language I was using.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gave me the vocabulary, it just opened up the field to me. It turned out I had been doing astral travel.
Really?
And I would float. I would leave my body and float about at the top of the church ceiling, just floating over the crowd, looking at them. And you were supposed to look, anytime the person said a scripture, you were supposed to look it up in your copy. So I would get twatted because I'm away up here, and then literally feel the woof as you zoom. Yeah. So that, I think I was 13, 14 when that first happened.
Wow.
And then it was a regular experience.
They call that daydreaming back in the day, don't they? But it is, it's great.
So that was my first real sort of step into spirituality. But when I left the cult, I was angry.
Right.
I got into drugs, alcohol. Reality sucked. So
I can imagine you would be very angry.
Yeah.
Because the world is against you.
Yeah. So why hang about in this reality? Let's go and find other ones where I can be happier.
Yeah.
And so I did. And I've never been an addict, but I've abused drugs. Mm-hmm. Anytime I got into one specifically and got to a point where I realised this is not the right thing for me, I stopped it that day.
Right. So you're fully aware, actually.
Yeah. And also the very first time I took a psychedelic, two of my friends had a bad trip.
Right.
And I paused my trip, helped them.
Amazing.
And then got back into mine. And it was only in the chat afterwards with the group of us that I realised, oh, this isn't normal for you guys. So that was the start of my shamanic path.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Very natural.
Yeah, but didn't know why. And then started learning.
Very good.
So I was in that space for many years until I was in my early 20s. When I was 23, I met a man who I will be forever grateful to, a guy called Ed. He's an astrologer. He was raised a Catholic, but also spent some time in a cult that was quite similar to the one that I was in. But he joined as an adult as a truth seeker.
Okay.
Stayed in it for a couple of years and then left.
Right.
So when he met me, he was the first person that I had met that could argue with me and had enough Bible knowledge and so on to be able to defeat me in this arm wrestle of theological debate, which was what I was doing prior to that. And so he would ask me my opinion.
Okay.
What's your opinion on this, Chris? I go, blah, 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 blah. And that's not your opinion. Yes, it is. And you go, well, it's their opinion. It's the cult's.
Right.
Oh, fuck, so it is. Right.
Yeah, okay.
So I need to have my own opinion. And then I would say, right, well, this is what I think. And he'd go, that's interesting, but that's also the cult's view, because look,
right.
you just said that in different words.
Because it's just a program.
Right. So I went to his house every day for 3 months. He stayed on my street. And we would go and have a cup of tea and chat, and he would throw questions at me, I would throw questions at him. So he spoke about his time in Catholicism, in spirituality, in astrology, and his time in other cults. He also spoke about other faith systems, the mythology, the history of religion, and looking at political systems, not just religious structure.
And how old were you then?
23.
Okay, so you're still very young, and were you always interested in this, or was that just part of your? Do you think that's part of the program and to take you on that path?
Yeah, I mean, we can step into that later on.
Yeah.
I personally believe that we, as eternal beings, we choose each lifetime. And so I chose those lessons to get the education that I needed. Because if you get a mollycoddled childhood where you're wrapped in cotton wool, when you meet them at 27, they don't have life experience.
No, of course they don't.
They haven't really grown in certain ways.
No, definitely
So you
not.
need to choose the tough times. The trick is not to get bogged down by these events in the past and let them be chains that hold you back.
The past isn't you, is it?
No.
But we can go into
It should be
that.
a building block and a stepping stone to rise up and grow.
Yeah, a lot of people get stuck in that, but that's part of, again, we'll talk about it, I suppose, where the programming gets a hold of you, and if you don't go within, if you don't do the inner work, because it is work.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll talk about it.
It's a never-ending job.
Of course it is.
Yeah. You think you've got there and go, oh, fuck.
There's another one.
Usually back to the same thing, but just at a different level.
Yeah.
It's not a circle, it's a spiral. You're going deeper and deeper each time that you come back to something. So anyway, after some weeks of talking, 3 months of talking every day, and during that time, actually, before I say that, during that time, he would ask me, what's your opinion on such and such? And to begin with, as I said, I was giving the indoctrination. I was giving someone else's opinion, even though I had got kicked out at 17 and at 13, and here I was at 23, 10 years later.
Spitting out the programming,
without
the
knowing
teachings.
It. And in every other breath saying that I hate it. And yet I'm spitting out the programming.
Interesting.
Isn't it? So he was able to point that out to me. And with days and days and days of essentially him being, the therapist I needed.
That's great, isn't it? Though he was there at the right time.
Yeah, he was just a dude.
Yeah, but he was teaching you to think.
Yeah, he's a welder. So a very grounded job. Just a nice guy. So there was one point which I'll never forget, and he asked me my opinion on a particular thing. And so some of this new stuff that he'd been telling me about philosophy and religion and psychology and astronomy and all these things. Yeah. When he asked me a question, I responded, oh, this, and this, and this. And I didn't get to finish my sentence because he stopped me. He said, Chris, whoa, stop. That's my opinion. What you're saying to me now is what I've been telling you in the last few weeks. And then the immortal line, fuck off and get your own opinion. It's taken me decades to get that, and it's mine. You're not stealing it. Get your own. I might be wrong. Yeah. But these are my opinions, and I've gathered them, and I'm okay with them potentially being wrong. I think they're right, but they're subject to change with further information. So they're my current opinions. Yeah. Please don't steal them off me. Get your own. And it was one of the biggest gifts I've ever been given. Critical thinking.
I love that because people fight, and we'll probably talk about this. They will fight over an opinion.
Yes.
They will kill over an opinion.
Yes. Okay. Especially if they feel it's an opinion that they now set in stone. Yeah. Because you draw a line in the sand. Absolutely. You make a flag, and now you've got to defend it. Yes. Whereas if it's a viewpoint that's subject to change with further information, because if you look back on yourself 20 years ago, you have different views. So you've grown and evolved. Well, that you would hope you'll grow and evolve in the next 20 years as well. So we shouldn't stick any lines in the sand today and go, this is my belief.
No, definitely.
As a video I'm sure many folk have seen recently somebody getting interviewed in the street, and he's like, you can't believe in what you know, and you can't know what you believe. Because to believe in something, you can't know it. You have to believe.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you know something, you know, so you don't need to believe.
That's right, yeah. Yeah. That's right. Someone who was, I think it was my friend, Callie Spell, she said that there's lie in believe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the knowing. That's what's important, isn't it?
Exactly. So, to finish that little story, he taught me that critical thinking. And the end of that period, at the end of those 3 months, I left his house. I walked to the end of his driveway to just before the public footpath. A sunny day, and it was like I was struck by lightning. I stopped dead in my tracks and had this feeling rush through my body. It was highly charged.
Yeah.
And then I felt like in my brain, like this sort of level right in the middle, I felt like someone had pulled a plug and there was like water was draining out. It physically felt like that.
Right.
And then I felt this gap, this empty space in my head. And I knew instantly what this was. That was the indoctrination.
Wow.
It was the physical sensation.
That's
it
crazy.
literally poured away in that moment. It was like an epiphany, I guess.
Wow.
And I was just so happy. And my immediate thought, and I have stood by my word to what I said in that moment, was, oh my goodness, it's all gone. Now I'm going to fill it with my own shit instead of someone else's. And it might be wrong, but I don't care.
Yeah.
Like it's my shit. And so that's what I'm going to do.
I love it.
Yeah. And as we spoke about before we began the podcast, one of the things that I'm very interested in is ultimate truth, not opinionated truth or truth that's only true for now, like ultimate truth.
Yeah.
And so that moment, that release of all that gave me this space where I could start searching for ultimate truth. The cult I was raised in, like many cults do, use certain words with a twist of understanding. And in that cult, truth was a word. They said we're in the truth. They defined their religion as being in the truth. So it's a twist on the word truth. And as I came out of that and understood and then went through the process of learning, it was a lot of rubbish.
Yeah.
It then gave me this different perspective on the word truth. Well, is it subjective? Is it something that someone can have their truth and then I can have my truth? And then I researched that. And that's the sort of definition of a solipsistic society. Solipsism is I'm the centre of the universe and everything revolves around me and you're the centre of your universe and it all revolves around you. It's a very selfish and individualistic. And if you look at the world today, social media, there's a lot of that happening. And I see it as quite a divisive thing of, oh, you can have your opinion. And yeah, we can have our opinion, but that doesn't mean that I have to say that that's true and you have to say that that's also true.
It's that opinion. It's recognising actually it is an opinion.
The truth is the truth no matter what we think it is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that ultimate truth.
Can I ask you just to go back a little bit? So during your time in this cult and the upbringing, were you at any point critically thinking anyway and going, well, that's nonsense? That's nonsense. Or were you just chastised and that's what took you out of it? Was the moments where you were going, well, I'm not having any of this?
Yes. There was definite moments that I saw the words that people would say in power within the cult was different from sometimes their behaviour. And I saw the hypocrisy in that.
Right.
And so it led me to, particularly with that word truth, because they were saying it was, and the elders within the church. The cult I was in didn't have a minister. It had a body of elders, of lay preachers.
Okay.
So they would all jostle for position with each other.
Okay.
Which makes it a terrible environment. And this is the environment my stepfather was in, trying to act pious amongst these other elders.
I see.
And here's his black sheep stepson just ruined it for him.
Yeah, well, it's an ego trip in itself, though.
Oh, exactly. And they're all trying to be big fish in a very small pond.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it gives them power, very much gives them power. But I saw what that was doing, and I also saw the inequality.
Okay.
You could be in power as a man, but if you didn't have those physical bits and you were a woman...
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The misogyny was
Wow.
horrendous and still is. Well, they're a Christian cult, so Christianity
Yes.
took the divine feminine out and made her the Holy Ghost. You know, there's always sacred trinities in the ancient religions, and
That's
it's
right.
the divine father, the divine mother, and the divine child.
Yes.
Christianity killed off the divine feminine and made her a Holy Ghost. They're so scared of the divine feminine, which is interesting.
I've got an interesting experience, I suppose. I was my mother. She's so wonderful as a human being. She's just like pure, you know. But she when we moved to a new town when I was about 6 years of age. I think she was looking for a social element, but she also was looking for something in her life. So she joined a Free Methodist church in the area. So I was brought up around that age to about 11, 12-year-old in the Free Methodist church. And my dad, or my stepdad, he's a staunch atheist, or he was at that time. And I used to go twice a week. So I think it was I used to go to church, a Sunday school, and a church club on a Wednesday. So I was there quite a lot.
Yep.
And at the church club, they wanted my dad to come to church. Why is your dad not coming to church? Me and my sister were there, you know, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, he doesn't believe in God. And so they made me pray. So they were saying, well, you need to pray. You need to pray for your dad, you know, because he's going to go to hell, effectively. I was terrified. I was about 8, 9-year-old. I was terrified for my dad. You know, my stepdad had come into my life at 6, 7 years of age. I hadn't had a father figure until that point. I was terrified that this guy who I'd fallen in love with was going to go to hell. Yeah,
it's very common.
Very common. Yeah. Anyway, so they say you need to ask him as well. So they made me ask him every week, do you believe in God, Dad? You know, and it'll be like, no. And then eventually, I think he must have got so fucking sick of it. And he just went, yeah. So I went into the church club and I said, he believes in God. Oh, like that was it. Then see, prayers work, you know, but something twigged in me then. And I thought, what have they just done to me? Mm-hmm. And I was only a kid, but I recognized it. Something was like, no, that wasn't right.
You can feel it in your core. I felt it that it's so interesting, the similarities you've just pointed out, the age and the stepdad and so on. I had to go out preaching.
Right.
So I haven't mentioned the name of it, but I don't mind. It was the Jehovah's Witnesses was the cult I was in. So they go out knocking the doors. Yeah. Or on the pester, as I like to call it. And they had me doing that. And I would you had to tell how many hours you'd done each month.
Really? It's very strict, that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And you got taught, they had a ministry school where you would be taught how to speak to people. And I would lie in my report. They never knew. I always got commended for it. I thought, you know, he can't be watching and talking to these people. And I see that person lying, and I see that person lying. And I saw that person pretend to put money in the contribution box, but they just folded it in their hand. That kind of stuff. Yeah. But then, more so as I got a little bit older, I then looked into the doctrines of the cult itself. Like, what do they believe? What are the tenets of their faith? And can I prove that wrong? And so I actually went, it was interesting you saying about your stepdad being an atheist. I became a fundamentalist, flag-carrying atheist. I was a Richard Dawkins fanatic. And
complete opposite.
Yes. Yeah. And then life is experiential. So experiences started to show me that actually that might not be the case. Yeah. I don't necessarily believe in any gods. I kind of call myself a spiritual atheist these days.
Do you?
Yeah. That's another discussion.
That's interesting, yeah.
But that was really a big start of my process. And I think all of those bits of my journey, from the isolation at 13 to 15 and the meditation and so on, that gave me really good insights and understanding, and gave me strength and resilience, and pointed out that I did have an inquiring mind, because I knew there was something afoot. I just didn't. I was so caught up in the process that I was going through that between 13 and say 17, I wasn't looking. I was aware, but it was just a subconscious thing. I wasn't specifically looking. I then started looking, and I thought, well, if I'm supposed to be imperfect and I can prove them wrong, they must be wrong.
Yeah.
So I started trying to apply that to other religions, initially Christian faiths. And then I thought, I've proved this one wrong and I've proved this one wrong. How many more are there? And I looked, and at that time there was like nearly 50,000 individual Christian
sects. Is that
sects.
right?
Yes.
And isn't the churches as well? I think they're listed with the government as a certain kind of number. So it's a business, effectively.
Yeah, because it's a charity. It's viewed as, and you don't pay tax.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. A la the Scientologists a few years ago, when they had their big victory of not having to pay tax and be recognized as a church. So yeah, I can't remember where I was going there. So I left at that age and really put my efforts into staying away from reality for a while.
Okay.
But also delved into faith, understanding, challenging other religions.
Yeah.
And I realised that with 40,000, 50,000 sects, how am I going to prove them all wrong one by one? That'll take me a lifetime of lifetimes.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, they're all based on this one book. So I'll research that. Okay. So I started researching the Bible, and then I looked at like the Torah and other religious books. Then when I met this guy at 23, he opened the doors even wider. So I was looking at like the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and other ancient Hindu texts. I was looking at the Sumerian tablets and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and looking at the Dresden Codex of the Mayans, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
All of these things, the Nag Hammadi scrolls, the early versions of some of the Bible texts, and the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, of course.
Interesting.
And gaining these understandings, and going through personal experiences that led me to a point where I realised that fundamental atheism was in and of itself a religion, because it's defended like a religious fanatic would defend it.
Yeah.
And so I steered away from that. And now have my own views, but they're all a bit subject to change. Should more information come along that makes me want to...
And why shouldn't it be that way?
Yeah. It should be fluid. Yeah. We're in the flow of the universe, so...
Yeah. Well, why shouldn't it be that way? Yeah.
So while I was then sort of settling myself and getting my own understanding, I also was recognising the problems that were carried along with me being excommunicated from the cult.
Right.
My family were told not to communicate with me once I left the house. So there was a complete lack of contact until my first daughter was born, and I made the choice, speaking with my wife, should we let them see our daughter?
Yeah.
And she said, I don't know. This was your life. You figure it out. You'll know. And I said, well, my fear is if I don't let them have any contact with her when she's 15 or 16, she may rebel and go run into these people.
Yeah.
That would be terrible.
Yeah.
So I let them have limited interactions. And this caused problems because they would try and preach to my daughter and my other daughter when she was born. And I had to step in and remind my mum that, remember when I was 14 and you said, my house, my rules, you'll do what I'm saying?
Well,
you're my son.
Now.
Well, my fucking kids, my rules.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll do this or you won't see them.
Yeah.
So I did restrict her, and particularly my stepfather, from seeing my children for extended periods. But this also gave me more opportunities to communicate with her as well. And having researched how wrong it was and how I could physically sit down and go, this is how this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Here it is in black and white, and here's the backup and the backup, all the evidence. And so I tried to present it to her, and I tried to present it to my sister and to my brother. And I've got cousins and aunties and uncles that are all in the same cult. And friends as well, or former friends. And I tried to present it, and I got shut down, and they got angry. they rejected me. As I would say some truth, it was like you saw these shutters going down over their eyes.
Well, I've seen those shutters quite a lot these past few years.
Well, you know. So I thought, what is this? What's causing this? Because I'm giving them facts.
Yeah.
Like, this is solid.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned the phrase cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
So I researched it. You know, what is cognitive dissonance? It's when there's two truths being held within your psychology and your mind can't handle those two truths. So it has to try and adjust them.
Yeah.
Adjust them so they'll ignore some part of it. The usual one psychologists use as an example is smoking. So you know smoking cigarettes is bad for you, it's damaging, but you tell yourself, I'm going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And so that's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
That when you think into it and you start to feel uncomfortable, that's the dissonance. Dissonance creates discomfort, anxiety, stress. Like, it's not a nice feeling. It's a physical sensation in your body.
Yeah.
So when the phrase comes from, I believe, the 1950s, cognitive dissonance was first coined.
Right.
And it came from a psychologist who'd been looking at an ongoing case, actually, that was in Asia. I think it was China or India. I think China, where there'd been a natural disaster.
Right.
And the people in the area were traumatized. But then this rumor spread around that there was going to be a second disaster.
Okay.
And this didn't come about. And the psychologists were looking at this and saying, why? And for years, they believed that it was sort of a cultural thing that had came up. They didn't know why. And then this researcher said, well, actually, I think it's like a justification. It's to help justify the fear. It's to help. And he described the dissonance of this experience and how it made them feel uncomfortable. And through the explanation of how they had created this thing and reacted to it, he saw that it was about being in a state of fear, but also being in a state of peace, because it was their natural home and they couldn't balance those two things at the same time. And so they created this other story as to help with the dissonance.
Right.
And so he wrote that down. He then, with a couple of other researchers, joined a cult to put this to the test.
Interesting.
Yeah, this lady, whose name escapes me, but she believed she was getting messages from aliens from a planet called Clarion.
Right.
And she said that there was going to be a global flood. Don't quote me exactly, but I think 1954 was the year that she said this was going to happen. December the 21st, winter solstice.
Okay, yeah.
It definitely was. But the year, maybe not that year. Anyway, she'd said that and she'd got a bunch of followers. So these psychologists joined the group. And when that day came and went peacefully, her and her followers then had a choice. So they had all invested lots of stuff in their life, their daily, things that they did in their everyday life, their belief structure, their friends, etc. And so she said, well, it's brilliant. We have put so much love and positive energy into the world through all of the things we've been doing in preparation for this experience. We've saved the day. How good are we?
Couldn't lose then, could you?
Oh, it's amazing. Like, so good. So her followers then had a choice. Did they recognise this was a cult? This was like a time limited,
have I been done?
End of the world thing? Or do I change with this new truth that she's offering, which is dissonant to the evidence of facts, because my family, my lifestyle, my friends, my daily activities do this, are pointing to this. And so they went that way, most of them. Some did leave, but many of them just adopted this stuff. And the researchers found that there were 3 key factors that helped make them ignore the real truth and kind of twist stuff in their head to maintain this lie, maintain this culture that they lived in, because they were frightened of losing their whole culture, which you'll also recognise from the last few years.
Yeah.
So the 3 things. First of all, that there was enough of their daily life, their daily activities was involved in this belief structure that it gave it gravitas. The second thing was, had they done things that they couldn't go back on?
Interesting.
Had they committed acts of a certain kind, whatever that may be, that they couldn't reverse? And that was, implications of the lie. And then the third thing was, how many people around them in their social community also believed the same thing, so they created a self-supporting network. And if you had all of these factors in a heavy way, you were much more likely for them to stay in the cult.
Right.
So you recognise those three factors from what's happening in the world. So going back to my own personal story, having recognised what cognitive dissonance was, and having attempted to communicate some truths to friends and family, and watched the shutters go down, like literally saw their eyes misting over and they're not focused anymore.
Yeah.
And you're like, why is this? So gained the understanding of it being cognitive dissonance, but then I'm like, right, well, how do I fix this? How do I get around this? What can we do?
Yeah.
So I tried. I started trying methods. And this is one of the things I've been sharing in the last 3 years.
Okay.
Is some of these methods, which for the most part, if I'm honest, they failed.
Yeah.
But you've got to have failed attempts to learn what doesn't work.
Sure you do, yeah.
And keep trying. So trying to just present the case and present facts doesn't work. Just doesn't work. Because remember, as I said, the dissonance creates discomfort.
Yeah.
In your physical, like they don't like it. It makes you agitated, makes you angry, makes you defensive.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want this information. I don't want to feel like this.
Yeah.
So if you present them with facts, that's how they're going to react.
Sure.
And then that creates arguments. And then you're like, well, I've just woke up to what's going on in the world, and you need to know this. I'm trying to save my family. I don't want you getting that jag. Blah, 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 blah. And they're just reacting more and more and more from the dissonance. It makes them more and more uncomfortable. And then you don't see them for 3 years.
Hence a lot of the relationships that are broken down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I tried a few different things. Let me say a couple of them.
Yeah, please.
So one of them was direct approach. Let's just go and get the information. Say it as it is. The shutters go down every single time. Unless they are prepared for that move themselves, and sometimes they are, but unless they're ready for it or they come asking you, you're pissing into the wind. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I tried various methods of that, but ultimately that's the method. No matter how you play it out, if you just go direct, it ain't going to work.
I've seen a very visual representation of that in the past few years on a video, where sadly somebody who had the injection went into a fit and was stretched out. There was a queue for more, everyone was there to have theirs, and they're all watching this guy getting stretched out, and then they just carried on.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, it is, but the programming was so intense.
If you think about what they have to give up their whole structure. Like, I saw it very physically in my own life. My mother's community, her best friends, her work, her colleagues, her daily activities, her weekly spiritual activities.
Yeah.
They are all associated, her family, her partner, half of her children, nephews and nieces. And so she's got all of that as this structure that holds her in place, that's part of her everyday life. And there's a truth. It's a false one, but it's a truth that's the anchor point for all of that.
Yeah.
So here I'm coming in with another truth, and I don't have any of those foundations that this one has.
No, exactly.
Because there's no structure, there's no family.
You're jumping into the wilderness.
Right.
Yeah.
And to offer these two truths, on the scale of life, that one's going to weigh heavier, and it's got more weight to it. And so her consciousness goes with that.
Yeah.
So I then tried to make them think for themselves, which sometimes works.
Okay.
But what I did was I decided to use other cults, because I thought I can't just use these ones. I'll need to branch out a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I invited the Mormons over.
Nice.
That was a giggle. These two young lads who had a badge saying they were elders, but they were both like 19.
Wow. Okay.
Came along. Really nice young lads. And I don't know if you know the structure of the way the Mormons work.
No, I don't know.
They go on a mission between sort of 18 and 22, 23. For a couple of years, they'll go somewhere in the world and they'll live in poverty. They're not allowed a car. They're not allowed certain things, so they have to travel on foot and get the buses and scrimp and save. And it's a real way to learn humility as they see it, and you're giving back. And they will do nice things. I've seen them rock up at someone's house and knock the door. Do you need any help? Yes, I need the hall painted. And they did it in their shirts and ties. Yeah. So anyway, someone that I knew was connected to them. So through her, I asked if they would come and see me. And I said, I'm interested in joining. Okay. But I have some questions. So they came along, and I had long done research on their cult, and because they are a cult as well, and I had a list of 4 questions. Now, I'll not bore you with the theological intricacies of these 4 questions, but the first question was a simple one. Can you go to the 10 Commandments where it says, thou shalt not kill? And I got a bunch of Bibles out because I had 3 or 4 different Bibles. They had their ones. So we had like 6 different versions of the Bible out at the same bit for the 10 Commandments. And I asked them to read it. And sometimes there's footnotes at the bottom. So I got them to read 2 or 3 verses before and after, and all the relevant footnotes. And once we'd established that, I says, where in that does it say, thou shalt not kill unless your government wants you to go and destroy another country's regime for oil, for business, for politics, for whatever? It says thou shalt not kill.
Good question.
Well, one of them's dad was a Marine.
Okay.
So he had a bit of a meltdown.
Right.
Shame. But I wanted to know. And I said, look, these are my truths. You know, I'm really interested in what you've got, and I like this Joseph Smith guy, and I like this story of the prophet Moroni and that coming towards him. So I'm in, but I've just got some questions. So please help me. And they couldn't really answer it in that moment. They were a bit defensive. And I saw that. And so I said, as I'd planned, look, can you just take these questions away? Go and contact head office. Go and speak to your mum and your dad, or whoever, your elders, whoever it is you need to speak to. But go and research this for me, because I want to know. Yeah. And made an appointment for them to come back a few weeks later. Okay. They did. So brought them in and sat them down, got them all comfortable, and then said, okay, so did you look into my questions? And one of them said, well, on the bus on the way over here, and he flicks open his little notepad for his return visits to people. On the way over here, we spoke about that, blah, blah. And I just went, excuse me, sorry, stop. Are you telling me that you only started thinking about my questions when you noticed you were coming to see me in your little return visit book? And he said, yes. I said, brilliant. Thank you very much. It's time for you to leave. And I threw them out. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you've answered me. You've given me exactly the answer that I needed, which is you haven't gone away and thought about this. You've disrespected me by not contemplating my questions, thinking you can just come back here at this point and jump back in. You couldn't answer my questions the last time you were here. Yeah. And I asked you to go and research it, and you haven't. Where's your respect for me? Fuck off. And nice. Threw them out. Yeah. But what I had learned was that even though I had given them questions, and they're supposed to be like trying to help me join. That's the reason they're here. Yeah. So help me. But they couldn't. And what stopped them? Cognitive dissonance. It didn't even allow them to look at the questions.
Yeah, but they couldn't. Yeah, they just couldn't face that, could they?
No. So that was a lesson. So then I thought, well, how else can you do it? How do people who are not necessarily nice people get nice people to support them? They personalise it. They make things about them. You look at a movie that's about a horrible person, but the first part of the movie is about a disruptive childhood. You're like, oh, what a shame. Yeah. And you've bought into the character. Yeah. But if you're just told about their deeds without having bought into the character, you can be very dismissive. But if you've bought in, you'll defend them a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the angle that I went at next. I started writing a story. And I didn't end up sending it to my mother.
Okay.
Because in my spiritual journey, I came to the point where I realised it's her path.
Yeah, get that.
I can present the information, but she has to come and take it. I can't strong arm her out. And also that point about all those daily life elements that she doesn't have. You know, my mother's now in her 70s.
Yeah.
I can't take her away from that. If she wants to leave, it's her choice, but it's going to be a trauma.
Of course it will be, yeah.
So I recognised I shouldn't do it. But I finished the project, which was writing a book or a short story, which involved someone who was in the cult disappearing and starting a little mini cult of his own, but still following their rules, and how he ended up out of their system and how he ended up getting kicked out. But ultimately, it was all about him being really pious and saying the right words in the first few chapters. They would buy into that.
Yeah.
And then by the end of it, this person that they love, this character that they've bought into, is now getting kicked out. So do they get kicked out with them? Because they now feel it. They can resonate with that. And so in speaking to people, because I help people leave cults now.
Okay.
I do it on a voluntary basis. And I only do it from personal experience. I started off helping people leave the cult that I was in, and then branched out to other cults, having studied and researched them, and then found actually there's a template that you can take and put on any religion to gauge whether it is a cult or not.
Okay.
And not just religions, political groups. And so
Yeah.
It was actually initiated with a guy who was studying the Chinese communist regime under Chairman Mao.
Right.
And like, how have they brainwashed 1 billion people?
Right.
And so he worked out these 8 points, and that's how they could control the minds. So you take those 8 points and overlay it on the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I think they tick 5 of them, as do the Mormons, the Scientologists. I think it's 5 or 6.
Wow.
And there was another researcher who was caught up in a cult. He took those 8 points and expanded on them. A guy called Stephen Hassan.
Right.
Combating Cult Mind Control is his book. It's brilliant. I think he breaks those down into 17 points that are more specific to cults, religious cults.
Yeah.
So very good understandings in that book, and that's the method that I've used, the personalization method, to help people. But those are people who wanted it.
They want to, yeah. They're looking to break that.
If you remember what I said about the indoctrination for myself, I was out for years and wanted it out, but was still, until he helped me.
It's very interesting that, I mean, aside from a cult as such, a general programming of an individual happens anyway, doesn't it?
Yes.
Through indoctrination at an early age. So your parents have been indoctrinated. Then you're sent to an indoctrination camp at the age of 4 years of age. Up until 7, you are very deeply programmed in a certain way to behave. Then you are taken to high school where, again, you are certain ways of behaviour. Then you may even pay for higher education, further education, education, but it's more indoctrination. And then you are taught that, or you are told, you know, you behave a certain way, then you might get a good job and you might end up having the life that you wish to enjoy.
Yes.
But it's a cult.
Well, the education system was certainly in this country, was started by the churches. So the hierarchical system within the schooling is identical to the hierarchical system of the church.
But nobody realises, I'd say nobody, that's wrong, because a lot of people do, but you are never fully aware of who you truly are, because you are just running around with a program.
Spouting other people's opinions.
Yeah, but you, without knowing who you truly are, that's why there's so much anxiety and so much stress in this world, because you're basically living a lie.
Yes.
And not knowing your true self and your true power within as well.
Yes.
Never understanding that. And people will go throughout their entire lives and end up in the graveyard without ever knowing that. And that's tragic.
It is. Yeah.
It's tragic.
It's a sad thought.
It is a sad thought, but I truly believe that many people are, because of the past few years as well, questioning the reality that they've been brought up in, and then questioning the lies that have become apparent to them, which is then giving them an opportunity to look within and find their true selves.
It's actually been a bit of a blessing in disguise.
In that way, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when we bring this up to date, and I've been awake and aware, I guess, as you might call it, since 9/11, 2001.
It's a long time.
Yeah. I grew up in central Scotland, which at the time was a big steel manufacturing place. And the old guys that sat in the pubs that I drank in as a 17, 18-year-old were old steel workers. And to a man, they said, fuel ain't going to melt that steel, boy.
Interesting.
So I knew. I saw the world changing. And also because of my upbringing and not believing men in suits and ties.
Yeah.
I could just see and smell there was something wrong.
Yeah.
And so I got deeply involved in what's be classed as the conspiracy theorist realm. Was there watching various conspiracy theories evolve, perhaps some that are true, perhaps some that are red herrings, or Psyops.
Psyops, yeah, and there's a lot of them.
There are indeed. And watched them and continued as a participant in that world, but at the same time with my own personal growth. I've put a lot of years into trying to heal the traumas and learn more about myself.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong journey. It'll never finish.
Yeah.
But, I've gone and drank the medicines and done all those
After
things.
journeys.
Yes, and sat in the darkness in the tent and in the sweat lodge, and I will continue to do that. It's an important thing to do.
Yeah.
But I then got up to 2019. End of 2019, I had just finished 6 months of living in a van, which is now 4.5 years, and started to get this whiff of stuff in the air of this COVID, flu thing. Now, we spoke at the start when you introduced me that I'm an astrologer. I do my own astrology for myself, and I study it for that and for the intrigue and for the esoteric mysticism and how it works with that. I'm not really one for doing someone's chart. But looking back at astrologers that I like and respect, there were some in 2011 who were saying, I don't see anything in 2012. This end of the Mayan calendar stuff, if you remember all that.
I do, yeah.
We're scared of the end of the world. They're going, 2012 is fine. 2020, that's a bit fucked up. So we knew it was coming. We knew something was coming. We just didn't necessarily know the specifics of the mechanics until the end of 2019 when they rolled out all the stuff that they did. That, we all saw it, so we don't need to repeat it.
No.
But then I saw the way people were responding. It was very clever the way they would set up this information of confirmation bias, of propaganda, of fear-based news items, of trying to make the collective become the police for everybody else. So we police ourselves.
Absolutely. Make heroes out of people.
And fear-mongering. Doing exactly the same thing that in post-Second World War East Germany they did. There wasn't many people in the Stasi. If you look at the numbers, there wasn't huge numbers of people in that organisation.
Right.
It was the people that did it to each other. That's how it was so successful. So I saw this becoming implemented. I also saw and was so happy to see so many people wake up. Yeah. Because it was a bit of a barren space before that.
I can imagine it was.
We were all waiting and going, please, if folk would just wake up. And we spoke about things and we got laughed at. And
mine was about 2012, my actual personal, and it was loose change that did it for me. Yeah. It was like, whoa, what's this? Because I was fully emotionally engaged with the towers. I'd been to New York, flew around them in a helicopter, been up the top of them, spent time there.
Yeah.
That was a year before they came down, and I'd had booked to go for a fortnight over Christmas and New Year, the year they came down, and I still went and spent time with the firemen that were there helping out and blah, blah. So I was fully engaged in all that.
Yeah.
And then when things started coming to me anyway, but then I saw loose change and I went, oh my God, I've been proper done here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then when you get that realization, you then want to start telling people.
You do.
But you have to remember they're suffering from the cognitive dissonance that you've just started to peel the layers back on.
Absolutely.
Which is why you have traumas of spiritual awakening.
Yes.
You go through all these major...
Don't you just?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because that's you peeling back those layers.
Yeah.
And it's trauma, it's anxiety, it's stress. So like a zit that you're bursting, it has to come to the surface.
Yeah. If you're enjoying everything that we're doing here at Drake, Michigan, please subscribe, ring my bell, and let's enjoy this journey together. Yeah.
And it's a bit painful.
It is.
A bit sore, leaves you a bit red.
Yeah.
And so this is the same. But then these people who've woke up, and I'm so glad that they did, so that we can now have the festivals like the one that you did and others like Carry On that have a growing group of people coming along in the community. They're en masse have been experiencing for the last 3 years the cognitive dissonance in their families, and they have seen the destruction of family life
100%.
that I've experienced for 30 years. My family still don't talk to me, and I'm okay with it now. I've got resolution to that within my own mind and my own understanding, and it helps me to help others as well, because I can talk through how I processed that and how I've dealt with it since then, and how I'm very much at peace with it now. But witnessing it, I remember saying to my girlfriend, like, wow, like, I know this feeling, I recognize this. And it's like that meme where the guy's got the noose around his neck and he says, first time, to the guy who's also getting hung. I felt the same, like, yeah, I've been here before, man. This is like, this is, I recognize this territory. And so since that point until now, have been looking for the opportunities to help people understand what cognitive dissonance is, and then how we can start, first of all, coming to terms with it. Because you have to lose the anger that you have at your relatives for not listening, because there's no point going through that fire, because they'll just fight that with their own fire.
100%, yeah.
And recognise the fact that they will, as you broach a subject, will physically feel uncomfortable. Like it's the physical reaction of it, and that's why people become angry, etc.
Of course they do, yeah.
So you have to accept that that's the case. And then you present the information, but primarily the thing that we need to do, and this is where I have had success. My sister, one of my sisters, my younger sister, she's out. I've got some friends who were in the cult in that same church who've come out, and they, I give them support.
Yeah.
Is knowing that when you come out, if you step away from that, being angry about it is not going to win anybody's minds over. You have to lose your own anger. You have to come to a space of peace and happiness, and you then become an example to these others.
So true. And
that's what some of my friends have said to me, and that's a real privilege to be in that, to go, it was tough. I came out and had all of my stuff happening pre-internet. There was no support groups.
No.
None of that stuff.
No.
So now, like, I'm in support groups. I help people who leave cults, as I've said. But it's not really so much that, it's being the example. People have said many times in conversations with me in the last 10 or 12 years, you don't sound bitter about your experiences. Like, some of them are really harsh and really affected me, and I've had to drink the medicine and go and see my inner child and give him a good hug and look after him and talk him through some stuff. But in showing the resilience and strength and having no animosity, Like I've written an email because they wouldn't see me. So I wrote an email to my mum and stepdad maybe 6 years ago.
Okay.
And said, thank you. Thank you for the lessons.
Yes.
Thank you for the understanding. Thank you for all those difficult days. They've made me who I am, and I'm proud of him.
Gratitude is very powerful, though.
Yeah. So I'm really grateful. And also, I know this probably weighs on your soul, so I forgive you.
And forgiveness is so powerful as well.
Yeah.
But forgiving yourself is so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's no, like, I don't feel at all bad about that experience. There is no anger. It's
but
love.
you've released it, though, haven't you?
Aye.
Because you've faced that head on.
So that's what inspires others.
I agree with that. Yeah,
so if you want
100%.
to change the world, be the change.
There's the words.
Don't
Absolutely.
talk about it. Do it. Because if you talk about it, people will shut down. And to try and get through to someone who's suffering from cognitive dissonance, those 3 steps that really keep them in that I mentioned earlier, imagine going to a Swiss vault, and outside in the car park, there's a dude with a barrier, right? So you've got to get in the car park first, and then you get out your car, and then you've got to get in the big, massive oak doors, and you've got 3 sets of them before you get to reception, where there's a guard. And then once you get through that, you get to this next room, which is an anti-waiting room, which is locked on both sides. And you go through 2 or 3 more of these until eventually you get to the outside of the vault. And then there's the main outer vault door, and then get that open with all the locks on that. And then there's the inner vault door, and then there's all these lock boxes, and you got to try and unlock a lockbox. How many things have you had to break through to get there?
Yeah.
You need to be a master thief to get through, you know, all of those things, like Mission Impossible style. Well, if you want to tell your family that they are living a lie and you want to get past their cognitive dissonance, that's how good a thief you have to be with their thoughts. You have to sneak in so none of their alarms go off until you get to that room where the big diamond is, and then...
It's like Inception, isn't it?
Mate, that's how hard it is. And that's why your family are reacting, and that's why friends are reacting, and that's why it goes like that. And having seen it, and having seen some success, so personalise it, make it about yourself, not about them. Do your thing. Express it, stand your ground. Don't get jabbed if you don't want to, and tell them why, but don't preach at them.
Yeah.
I grew up in a cult full of preachers, so I ain't getting preached at, and I ain't going to preach at others. I'll share my views, and happy to talk about them, but they're only my views, and I might be wrong, and that's okay.
Exactly.
So don't take my views as gospel. Be like Toto. Go and pull back that curtain and see who's pulling the levers for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, don't take my opinion or anyone else's.
Yeah.
Because I won't.
Yeah.
I'll go digging till it satisfies me. And that's what you have to do. Use your knowledge and understanding, and recognise that you might not know everything about a subject. You might have a lot of learning on a subject.
You might have a lot of opinions.
Yes, well, I don't know if you know if the is it the Kruger-Dunning or the Dunning-Kruger effect, whichever it is. But it's the effect of someone having a bit of positive bias about a subject that they don't really know that much about. And the problem is that they're unaware that they don't have enough knowledge. They don't have enough knowledge to know that they don't have enough knowledge on the subject. So the unaware are unaware that they're unaware.
Well, they are. But then even if you're aware, I think what's happening as well is people are swaying to a comfortable place as well. So you can create another cult effectively then. And you all then, it's almost like, well, I've seen it, and as you will have seen it, you know, the finger pointing starts, well, you're not that awake, are you? Because you are. So it's like, oh, well, maybe I don't know enough. And there just starts a lot more finger pointing, and everyone's reacting again in certain ways because everyone is traumatized by the whole event. So everyone starts being split into all these other areas. And nobody, again, is getting the opportunity because they're reacting through trauma and fear and everything else.
Yes.
Is finding the true self again. And because, in my opinion, and it is an opinion, we are creators and we create our own reality. We create our life. And if you are constantly fighting and in fear and constantly fighting in fear, you're not sitting back and creating anything.
That's right.
The environment is being created for you. Your fear is creating a mess.
You're right.
And that's what's happening in this movement, if you want to call it a movement, and everything is being split up into multiple fractions now.
Yes. The movement has been split into fractions both by the behaviour of those within it who are just reacting. And it's
fear.
normal. Yeah, it's normal human behaviour. It doesn't make them bad people.
No, not at all.
They're reacting. No. There is a process that you need to go through of self-development to come to that place of peace.
Absolutely.
A bit like I've done in my journey. I have to say that come 2020, I said to my close friends, like, I feel really bad for those people who are waking up right now because they've got a fucking shit ton of stuff to process, Chris, and I want it.
Well, I had a pub at the time. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
So I had a pub at the time, and we became a safe haven for a lot of people that was just waking up. And we had pensioners come in, that had spent their whole life in that program.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've been lied to all my life, and it was hard work for them. I had one beautiful elderly lady that could no longer communicate with her husband because they'd split so much on the views.
Yeah.
And it was awful for her. It was happening everywhere like that.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. And on that front, that's a good question. How do we cope? If it's someone that I live with, it's like my partner. Well, acceptance. Acceptance that they're not ready.
Yes.
Now, for me in my journey, I use an old story at this time. You might know of it. There's an old tale called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's a book that was released in the 60s.
Right.
And it's a metaphorical book. It's a story of a seagull going through his journey, and he's different from the other seagulls.
Okay.
But of course, it's a metaphor for us. And Jonathan, and I particularly resonate with him because he gets kicked out of the flock at a young age. So I resonate with that. And he leaves, and he's interested in flying and flight, and he learns stuff that they don't know, and it could help them raise their frequency.
Interesting.
But they won't listen. So he gets kicked out, and he travels away and lives on the wing, and spoiler alert, although it's a very short story, you could read it in an hour. It's ambiguous at the end of one of the chapters that he dies or ascends.
Yeah.
And these other doves come in, other gulls come in that are glowing with an internal white light and can fly faster than him and blah, blah, blah. So he follows them and he ascends to this new realm where there are other birds just like him doing the things he's been doing. And he becomes the student rather than the best of it as he was before.
Yeah.
And he's talking to his teacher, this master, and he says to the master, I remember all the birds on the cliff in the colony. And I wish they could understand and have this. And the master says, Jonathan, 10,000 lifetimes. It took a soul like yours 10,000 lifetimes to go through the processes and the understandings to get to the point where you can have this journey in this lifetime. Some of them have only had one lifetime as a soul. Or 5,000, and they're only halfway there. It's not our job to try and force them to understand what we understand. We just have to hold the space and be patient and wait for them. In the same way that I was waiting and others were waiting after 9/11 for this great awakening wave that happened in 2020, and another one will happen again.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We have to be patient. That thing about you're a bunch globetards and all that stuff, like using words like that or calling people who are not awake, calling them muggles.
That's divisive though.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not nice. It's specifically creating that divide.
It doesn't help.
If we go back to 2012 when you woke up and you and I had met back then and we decided to call all the rest of them by disparaging names, by the time they do all wake up in 2020, we've been horrible about them for 8 years.
I know. It's all low vibe stuff anyway.
And it makes a mockery of us helping them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we should be, from the start, from the outset, just remember they are you a few lifetimes ago, or one lifetime ago, or only 6 months ago, perhaps. And be the change. I was talking to someone recently about this. How do I tell my family this. I'm like, well, you say your truth and you stand in your truth. And you don't deviate from that, and you don't bow down. You do not get on knee. You don't bend your knee for anything. You stand your ground and stand your truth, but put the megaphone away. You're not a fucking preacher.
Aye.
Put the megaphone down. Answer. Respond. Don't try and dictate. Show them by your actions. Become at peace. Be that peaceful warrior. You know, find that grounded, centered part of yourself where when people come into your company, they're like, wow, I feel comfortable and relaxed. It's like, this is a rock that I could lean on in a storm.
Yeah.
Right? Be that. And then they'll ask you, how come you're like that in a world that's full of trauma and is topsy-turvy? Why are you so at peace? It's like, well, I do this. Because
at the end of the day, though, if your personal world, your personal reality is at peace, you know, you can teach others to find that peace, to find that abundance, that love and everything else.
Yeah.
Then the world is going to be a better place anyway. It doesn't matter what they throw at you because you are at peace.
Exactly.
So you're above it.
Yeah. That's the trick, but it's not necessarily.
It's not as easy as that, but
no.
But that's kind of where you want to be.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a snowball effect because people, well, why are you so at peace? Why are you doing so well in life? Why am I struggling? Why am I still angry and fighting? And while you guys are just having love and enjoying life.
Yep.
Well, let's do this instead then.
Yeah. I have some friends who unfortunately did get the first jab.
Yeah.
Or one or two.
Yeah.
And I didn't disconnect from them and disassociate myself from them. I've been disassociated enough in my life. I'm not going to do it to anyone for an opinion.
Yeah.
And also, I want to have my opinion. And it might be different from yours. So I want you to defend my right to have my opinion. Therefore, I need to defend your right to have your opinion as well, because that's how I get to have mine.
Exactly.
If we all do that, then that's cool. Because if we don't, we all end up automatons being forced to believe the same thing. And then where's individuality and freedom? And where's the cool conversations come from?
But this is the thing though as well, Chris. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not their fault that they did queue up and do that.
No.
You know, because it's been military grade, trauma-based mind control programming. It's been from birth until this point of like, right, we've got you now.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So why is it happening now?
Good question. Why is it happening now? I mean, it will be in the stars, will it not?
Bit of it, yeah. In fact, wholeheartedly, if you look back to the 60s or whenever it was when that song came out, the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Oh yeah,
well, it's true. We're not quite in the age of Aquarius yet. We're just on the cusp.
It's interesting you said that because someone told, I can't remember what speaker who said it happened in the 60s.
No,
but then I recently, with looking at Santos Bonacci's stuff over the past couple of years, recognised that we are just there or thereabouts kind of thing, and that's the age of knowing, isn't it?
Yes.
Not the age of belief.
Yes.
And the Pisces, the belief and doubt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way you can tell, if anybody wants to see for themselves, the way you can tell without using anybody else's information is look at the how would you calculate what the great age is that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
So you go on the spring equinox, the traditional start of the year.
Yeah.
And look to the east before sunrise, when you can still see the constellations. And the last constellation that's rising up as the light of the sun comes up and blots out the light of those constellations. So it's rising into that sign sitting on the horizon, and the sun is rising into it. So that's the one that's crossing the horizon. That's what great age we're in. Or the Platonic year, as Plato described it as well. That's what great year we're in. It's one of the three great cycles of the zodiac. The spinning once on its axis, the 12 in 24 hours, the 12 signs of the zodiac that we could see.
Yeah.
The solar year, once around the sun, the 12 zodiac signs can be seen with the sun being behind them. You know, if you're born just now, your birthday would be in Libra. That means if you blot out the light of the sun and look behind it, you would see the constellation Libra. So the Libra vibrations, frequencies are being brought through the lens of the sun during that time.
Right.
So that's the second great cycle of the zodiac. The third great cycle is to do with the precession of the equinoxes. So that's why it's called that. It's the spring equinox. You look at the constellation that's rising over the horizon. Due to this, the Earth's wobble, as it spins on its axis, it's not spinning perfectly. It's got a slight wobble.
Okay.
In the same way that if you had a spinning top, and
and
it can come away from perfect spin. So the Earth has that, and that cycle takes just under 26,000 years. And it's that one that we can see, because it's a long cycle. And in that circle, it goes through all 12 signs of the zodiac. And the way we notice it is which one's cresting the horizon on the spring equinox. So they get about 2,150 years each on average. Some of the constellations are bigger than the others, so they would get longer. But we are 2,023 years into the age of Pisces. That's why we're in the year 2023. It's of the great age of Pisces. So on the grand scale, we're actually about 100 years if you did the average, dividing the Platonic year by 12, 2,160, I think it is.
All right.
So we're 100 and odd years away
from that.
Yeah.
So in effect, then, we are seeing an end of an age, hence why there seems to be this huge madness around the world and the collapse and everything else that's coming.
It's the last days that's in the New Testament. What will be the sign of the last days, Lord? It's not the end of the world. It's not Armageddon. No. It might be some personal people's Armageddon because it's the end of their world, but not the end of the world. It's just the end of a calendar, and a new one starts.
Yeah.
It's the end of the age of Pisces, the last days of Pisces. To my mind, the Gospels are pure astrology.
Yeah.
Just
astrotheological.
Yeah. If you read that, for those with eyes to see and those with ears to hear, if you read the Gospels as an astrologer, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
And as you've spoke about, Brother Santos, as I call him, he was also in the same cult that I was in.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
So I liked his early stuff. His astrotheology, and into some of the syncretism. It's good that people are allowed to have different opinions, and I would defend his right to have his opinion.
Absolutely.
He has opinions at the moment I don't agree with, particularly about like the flat Earth and so on, and a couple of other subjects.
But everyone should have their own opinions, and
yes.
are allowed to.
Yes, absolutely. So the thing that I've seen in the last 3 years, you were talking about the movement and how it can be a bit toxic. People's opinions can take over. The movement pre-2012 was amazing.
Was it?
Aye. 2011, phenomenal.
Was it?
There was forums online where there was like people putting so much effort in, community building, talking about a whole range of subjects at great depth.
Right.
Like, I'm a studier of esoteric mysticism. And I have been for a long time. There was people studying deep mysticism on these forums, which I was able to get bits off and go, right, fuck, this is deep. And the movement was growing and growing and growing. And then in 2012, we got annihilated.
Really?
Yeah. So this is a controversial subject, but I've never really deviated away from controversy. I'm quite happy to face it head on.
Let's do it.
And I hinted at it just a few seconds ago. It's the flat Earth.
Right.
So in 2011, no one was talking about flat Earth. Nobody. I was in the community. I was watching. We were talking about Tesla coils. We were talking about making orgone devices, about going off grid, about making biodiesel and fuels and how we would sustain ourselves, and deep philosophical things for how to, grow your own spirit and mind. But also conspiracy stuff, looking at how the cabal, or whoever you want to call them, I wouldn't call them the elite because they're not elite. They've just put themselves in a certain position. They're not elite. How they, the machinations of these groups, and understanding that. Where was I going with that, Ant?
Well, you were saying that in the forums you were seeing
Yes,
the
that's
change
it.
in
You've brought me
2012.
back. Thank you. I've got one of these brains that
That's
runs
all
off
right.
at times.
I do that.
So the forums in 2012 were all, the end of 2011 into 2012, doing amazing, like really good. And then in 2012, Obama was president of America at the time.
Right.
And you can look this up. Don't take my word for anything. Do your own research. But during that time, 3 of his presidential addresses, in the same sentence, he mentioned the Flat Earth Society and conspiracy theorists. And as a badge-wearing conspiracy theorist of that time, I can tell you, none of us were talking about it.
Right.
That was bollocks.
Right.
Then at the same time, while reading the books and, connecting to people who are part of the mystery schools and so on, I was also using the internet and would watch stuff on YouTube, would look something up and I would get, and I definitely don't advocate getting all your truth from YouTube, but it does have its place. So as I'm watching videos on Comet Elenin and a few other things from 2011, for those who remember back then, I saw in that panel down the side, the recommended for you.
Oh, yeah.
That videos were coming up specifically related to the flat earth. And I never put that in my search.
Interesting.
And it annoyed me. Like, why am I getting these? I'm getting spammed.
Okay.
Because I've not put that in. I'm putting in for this comet and looking at this and, planetary weather, etc., etc. So why is this coming up? And it kept coming up and kept coming up and kept coming up. And actually, there was one specific video that kept coming up that was made supposedly by a Russian guy in his bedroom. It was slick.
Oh, yeah.
Like proper well-made video.
Yeah.
Really slick editing. Didn't look like it had been made by some guy in his bedroom. Production quality was great. And it was called Where Did All the Trees Go?
Have I heard that? I might have heard of that.
Big documentary, 2012.
Yeah.
It was the first one.
Right.
It was the first one that got traction. And those awakened groups and communities that I was a part of, like I was on the forum that the Jimmy Savile thing broke on. The guy who broke the story, who got killed, by the way,
Okay.
was on a forum that I was on a couple of forums that I was on, and I remember the thread and watching it. So there was loads of like amazing stuff happening in that time. That same forum disintegrated, split into 3 forums. They disintegrated. And one of the major factors, amongst a few, but one of the major factors was the flat earth debate. Because as soon as it came out, it was automatically, you're a globetard. You're a fucking idiot for believing the earth's flat. You're a fucking idiot and you're part of the cabal for believing it's a globe. There was no, we're mates and we can have a difference of opinions on this. It was, let's draw a very specific line in the sand. Let's pour some fuel in it and set fire to it. And we'll fight across that, because this is war. I took part in a debate on the Flat Earth at festival
Carry on.
a few weeks ago. And the vitriol from some people is phenomenal. But during my research in the previous months, I was in a bookstore, I won't say where, I was in a bookstore that has spiritual stuff. And somebody had come in while I was there asking for books on the flat earth. So when they left, I spoke to the shopkeeper and just for curiosity asked, has this been a regular or growing thing where you're getting more and more people asking you for flat earth material? And he said, well, funny you ask. I had people in here a few weeks ago who told me that like they got angry and they wanted to burn my shop down because I've got books that prove the earth is a globe. Book burning, Ant.
Wow.
They want to burn fucking books.
Wow.
Yeah, that's religious fervour. That's fundamentalism. So if we look at how it's making people act,
yes,
it's given them this fundamentalist attitude. And we know what fundamentalists do. They'll go and blow themselves up for a cause.
For opinions.
For opinions.
Yeah.
Right. And now, particularly since 2020, people waking up now They look at the pantheon of conspiracy theories that folk who've woken up are interested in and looking at. Well, as far as they're concerned, the flat earth has been there forever. But it's not. It started in 2012. And that thing about the panel at the side, the recommended for you, you can pay YouTube a lot of money, a huge amount of money, to get them to nudge it up the list, your video, be it a 3-letter agency or a government or a business who wants to.
Oh, definitely. Of course they do. Yeah,
right.
Of course they do.
It's called nudging.
Yeah, of course they do.
So these videos were being nudged up the list at that time, and then the subject immediately from the inside became divisive, us and them, and those great community spirit forums fell apart.
Well, we're seeing it. Well, we saw it 2 weeks ago, didn't we, with Russell Brand? It's the same trick.
Yes. You've forgotten his middle name.
The. I do love that. But that's what's happened. So then you have got straight away a division, and you've got two fractions of people of truth.
Yes.
Fight it. I know better than you.
Yes. And
that's what they've done again. And it's very clever. It's very simple but clever, I should say.
Very, both simple, clever, and effective.
And very effective, because everyone is fighting against each other now.
Yes.
And to the point where, because nobody can stay together, this fight is like, they're fighting each other. They're not fighting anything but themselves. And this is a come back to that same point. The fight is within.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I spent 3 years fighting what I thought what is, you know, a governmental totalitarian control, when ultimately my biggest fight, actually, which I embarked upon at the beginning of last year, was everything that's going on in here from my programming from birth.
Yeah.
Because once I started to break that down, I started to find happiness and peace in my life, and my life has got better and better and better.
Yeah. It's that thing that I had, you pull the plug and let the indoctrination go, and whatever method you can do it.
Yeah.
You know, I was lucky to have that person in my life, and then fill it with your own shit. You know,
yeah.
Make sure it's yours. It's not somebody else's opinion.
Exactly. And it's a tough one. Don't expect it to be easy, but it's well worth it though.
It's amazing. The inner peace, as you say, that comes at the end is palpable from other people. They're constantly saying, wow, there's such a peace in this space. Why is that? Well, we're at peace with ourselves.
Exactly.
In and of ourselves. You know, I've still got traumas. Nobody's ever fully healed.
No. And you know, I had the weekend, things popped up, walking the dog, and I'm like, why am I stressed about this? You know, why is that arisen and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But what I'm able to do now is sit on it, recognize it more, not react, respond rather than reacting, understand it a bit more, give myself a bit more compassion and a bit more love for, you know, at the end of the day, we've all been traumatized.
We have. There's people who use that quote from that Catholic religious group, whose name escapes me at the moment, who say, if you give me the boy until he's 7,
exactly,
I will give you the man. So the understanding of that, it's the Jesuits. That's what it is.
The Jesuits, yeah.
So the understanding of that is that we all go through 7-year cycles. You start off from birth until 7 on average, because it does vary. But from birth till 7, you're in your root chakra. So that's fight or flight, survival. Yeah. That's why a 2-year-old who gets whacked by its own parent will pick itself up crying and run to the same person that just hit them for support, because I'm programmed to just think that you're going to help me. Yeah. So you can program stuff into that child up to their 7, because that then becomes known as the age of reason. So you're stepping from the root chakra up into the sacral, which is about relationships and other
That's
people.
right. Yeah.
So a 4-year-old at nursery will just take a toy from another child because, fuck you, I'm having it. It's all about me.
Mm-hmm.
But an 8-year-old recognises little Johnny's different. So I'll just have to steal it this time if I really want it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just unthinkingly take it the way the 4-year-old does.
Yeah, yeah.
And the 4-year-old thinks that all the mums and dads at nursery are just the same as their mum and dad. All the homes are just the same. That's what it is. But the 8-year-old knows that little Johnny's mum and dad have got alcohol problems, and this other house is really, really nice because the mum does everything that you would want them, that my mum's not doing.
Yeah.
And you recognise the differences. And that's the time period where you're starting to develop your traits where you're copying others. So while, yes, you can program a child from 0 to 7 in that formative one, the next 7 years where you're copying others' behaviour are just as important. So to say, give me a child till he's 7 and I give you the man is a bit of a fallacy. We go through these 7-year itch. 7-year itch. That's why you get that, because you've changed completely in this cycle. At 14, you go from the sacral into the solar. And that's why a 12-year-old will wear mismatched granny's clothes and go out and play at dolls and dress up. But a 14-year-old ain't going out without the makeup on. Whatever way they want to dress up is their version of the peacock.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm not leaving the house until I'm all black or I'm all white or I'm all whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because they've gone to the self, they've gone to solar, and Sol, it's about your connection to the sun, so they turn inward. And that's why your teenagers are all angsty looking at themselves. So that first 7 years, yes, it's formative, but it's not definitive, and it doesn't create everything. It does create certain building blocks of indoctrination or life, but they're definitely surmountable, and you can definitely break them down. You just have to make the choice first.
It's all about a decision.
Which brings us back to the cognitive dissonance. If the other person doesn't make the choice to start to understand, it's pointless.
It is.
It really is pointless.
Yeah, it is.
You can talk about all these different subjects, and
I think we just need to have compassion, don't we? You know,
be the change, express it, show it, live it, and people will witness it and go, why is that happening there? Why has he always got a smile on his face? And why does good things seem to happen around him?
Exactly. Why is his life so great and mine's shit?
Yeah. And then you hope that they'll come and speak, or they'll watch and witness and go, okay, well, I'm inspired by that. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
And, you know, do it their way, because you shouldn't just completely mimic someone. You know, a bit like my friend who helped me. I may share a few opinions with him today, and I probably do, but there's quite a few that we don't share, and that's healthy.
Yeah.
So take the inspiration, watch and learn and listen and take inspiration, but challenge, study, look at things, pull the curtain back, lift the rug, see how is this working?
Yeah.
How is this going to work? How can we use this information to help others and to help ourselves? And this thing about the movement, we're battling each other. If we want to look at the last 3 years, because there's been an ebb and a flow in the movement as people have woken up. Well, I've watched this ebb and flow over decades now, but it's been very apparent in the last 3 years. So there was a common cause, and it was really powerful.
Exactly, and everyone stood together for that.
Yeah, and it didn't matter about your other opinions, because there was this one's so big and
it
so
was a
noisy.
big one. Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll focus on this. And we had the year that wasn't, and then we had the half year, and then we sort of stepped back in tentatively into the world, going, "Oh fuck, is it okay?"
Well, that's it. But they'll wait till everyone's gone that route before they throw the next one.
Well, indeed. But in the movement, the power and the strength and the immediacy and intensity of the fire of the initial cause went down because less fuel was being added. And we are really adaptable as humans. We can be thrown into an unusual circumstance and we can adapt to it very quickly, which is definitely a superpower. But in times like this, it's a bit of a negative, because you settle into things and dangerous situations become your norm, and you become almost comfortable with that.
Yes, that's right.
Which is crazy.
No,
but that's happening in the movement now, and you're seeing people who before weren't caring that you disagreed about this little tiny element.
Well, now they do.
Now they do, because this big thing's not as big as it was.
And that's exactly what's happening.
And it's a shame.
It is a shame.
But there was an inevitability about it. And so for those of us that recognise it, we shouldn't be disheartened. Remember that everything goes like a sine wave. It'll go down and it'll come back up.
Yeah.
You know, just like as we spoke earlier on, I was talking about truth before we started today, that I believe that universal truth is a straight line. And it's quite a thick line as well. It's not this, very thin band. This universal truth is this straight thing. And we as a species will deviate away from it, and then we'll come back towards it, and we're like, oh yes, we've got knowledge and the truth, and then we fuck it up again, and fuck, we're away from it, and then we come back, and so we're going through this sine wave.
We're born into sin, aren't we?
Oh yeah. If it was all just super cool, it would be boring, Of
course it would. You're not going to come and play a boring game, are you?
No, and if you look at the yin yang, or the Hunab Ku in Mayan philosophy, which is a symbology, which is very similar.
Yeah.
They're not 75% white and 25% black. It's 50-50. The darkness equals the light. Mm-hmm. And then you look in the case of the yin yang, within the white section at its core is the darkness. And within the dark section at the core is the whiteness.
Yes.
So if you straddle 1 foot on that black dot and 1 foot on that white dot, it means that your being is on the center line. Your spirit's on the center line as you step between those two worlds. So we need to know that, it's through the dark times that we recognize how good times can be.
Absolutely.
And that we need to help each other in the dark times. We came here for a life that's experiential.
Definitely.
Not necessarily one that was, just an easy ride. It's an experience.
No.
And some of it's intense.
Very.
Yeah. And,
Well, would you have it any other way?
No.
No. You have to tell me about Neo, though. Neo's been sat there through the podcast, and I'm not sure what Neo represents.
Okay, so this is Neo. He is a piece of organite. Many people think I call him Neil, but it's Neo, as in the dude in the Matrix, and it's an anagram of the word one.
Yeah.
So he is the one, and I couldn't decide whether his name was Neocortes for a new brain, or Neolithic because he's got a stone circle on his head.
Oh yeah.
And the indigenous tribes across the world, if you go and speak to them, they'll tell you some cool stuff about skulls.
Yeah.
First of all, they're not really associated with death. Skulls are protective. They protect your brain from being bashed, and they hold your brain knowledge. Mm-hmm. So their symbolism is protection and knowledge, actually. It's rather than death and destruction.
Right.
But they will tell you that if you carve a skull out of bone or wood or stone or crystal, or in this case resin, crystal and metal shavings, you're creating a consciousness.
Right.
Now, I don't necessarily have a religious belief, but the closest faith system, I guess, you could tie me to is animism, in which everything is animated. Everything has life. This microphone has life. Mm-hmm. It wants to amplify things. It wants to pick up voices and send it down the channel so it can be recorded and amplified.
Yeah.
That's its job. A fork wants to dig into things. A knife wants to cut. So when you create a skull, you're creating a consciousness that's related to skulls, which is like us. So I had to be in a very specific frame of mind when I made them. I've been making organite for 12 years.
Okay.
So organite is a machine that heals the air around it of electromagnetic radiation and pumps out positive energy. Mm-hmm. And I've made tens of thousands of pieces, most of which I've given away or buried at both polluted and high frequency sites. So you'll find bits across the world in sacred sites or just next to them.
Yeah.
Buried under the ground and so on, with crystals. So I started making organite in response to chemtrails, seeing chemtrails, and as a dad looking at these things and thinking, how the fuck am I going to affect this? I'm just a small being. And then I learned about organite and orgone devices and how we can protect and change the frequency around us.
Right.
And create that space. And so I started making it. And now working as a shamanic practitioner, I do a lot of frontline work when it comes to shamanic healing. So working with people with traumas and with perhaps attachments.
Yeah.
And so I need a certain toolkit to help me.
Yeah.
And he's part of the family that helps.
That's great.
I have a good relationship with him. So he goes everywhere with me. If I go and visit a sacred site, or standing stone or stone circle or someplace like that, he is always there and he always touches the stones. He gets to rest next to them.
That's great.
Yeah, and I've met him as well. I was on a medicine journey.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, a few years ago. I made him, or he was born in 2014. And I took him with me to an ayahuasca retreat in 2016. And on the second night, he came and spoke to me.
Did he?
He did, yeah.
And what did he say?
Well, he's a warrior.
Okay.
And he's very much the... you see a man of peace in front of you today. But years ago, I was a bit more... a bit like some of the people today who...
Fiery.
Aye.
Angry.
Not so much.
In fear?
No, just fiery.
Just fiery.
Aye. Not been angry for a long time, and definitely not in fear. Just passionate.
Passionate. Nothing wrong with passion if it's channeled.
If it's done the right way. Yeah. So I recognise what people are doing, because I try to tell people, but having been brought up in a cult and knowing what it's like to be preached at,
yeah,
you're like, oh, that doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah.
It's happened to me in the movement. This thing about us having differences of opinions and so on.
Sure.
I've had a flat earther come up to me and actually preach at me, and I've had to say to him, dude, like, I was raised by a preacher. I know what it smells like. You're preaching. No, I'm not. Well, you're repeating the same thing over and over with the view that hopefully I'll change my mind on one of the times that you're saying it. By definition, that's preaching.
Yeah.
So stop preaching at me.
And I think a lot of us can be guilty of that over the past few years. I think I spent in fear for my loved ones, preaching what I saw as dangerous,
Aye.
which lost me, my friends and family at that time, I suppose. Even though I believed I was doing the right thing, it was still an opinion.
Yeah, and it has an impact. And knowing what you know now, you can see why it had that impact.
Because I was preaching.
Yeah. And they're suffering dissonance. And it's
absolutely
physically uncomfortable for them to hear your words.
Yeah, very, very tough.
Yeah.
But during what you saw as a dangerous situation where you're under attack and you want to help your loved ones, you react because it's fear.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
But it took me last year to understand that.
You've done pretty good. There's some still sitting in fear and worried, like, what we're going to do, how are we going to survive. They go into almost a mental lockdown mode of themselves, and they cut the outside world. That's not what we're supposed to do.
No.
There are times, and from my personal experience, like, I can't take the cult programming out of my mum, my brother, my sister's heads. I can't do that.
No.
I can only be an example and show them and say to them, if ever you leave, I'm ready.
That's
if you walk out that door, I'll be waiting. No judgment. I'll be there. I'll help you. And you have to accept, on a personal front again, just in the last few days, I went back up to Scotland and got a message from a really old friend of mine who was in the same cult as me growing up. And this person hunted me down a few years ago to apologise for their part in shunning me.
Right.
And the hug I had with that person on that meeting was a hug that'll never forget me.
Yeah.
That I'll never forget. I'll never let go of that. It was amazing. And the stories that I was told about what they had gone through and how they'd experienced things, it really helped me in my own journey. So I've gone back to Scotland a few days ago last week and got a message from this person, and they've gone back to the cult.
Have they?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Having been out for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So these things have a hold.
Yeah, 100%.
A deep-rooted hold.
Mm-hmm.
And this person has, for whatever reason, has needed, but and particularly actually the last 3 years have been difficult, because what I see is a repetition of something I went through, so that other people who were in the same cult as me,
Yeah.
they maybe not define it as well as I have, because they're focused on what it is and trying to understand it. And that person specifically didn't. I had to sit with them and talk them through, and I've been supporting that person for years with this stuff. So it's devastating for me.
I bet.
But when I got the message, I had to reply with, okay, I'm not going to, because they asked that I didn't try and persuade them against it.
No, it's their decision, eh?
That's right. So I had to, and it was really sad. Like it was deeply upsetting, but I had to accept that.
Let it go.
Yeah, and choose my way of response.
Mm-hmm.
So I very carefully worded my reply, which wasn't gentle. Like I didn't mollycoddle that person.
Well, I didn't expect you to.
No, it was fairly firm. It was like, well, you've done this, so this is implications. Like, I am excommunicated. I am the devil incarnate to these people.
Yeah. So it causes a problem.
Well, if you go and join them, it means you can't be my friend. Because if you are, you could end up getting excommunicated for being my friend. And how's that going to help you? So I know that's not the case. So the implications of your behaviour is, and your choices is, you're going to shun me again, which they were really upset about before, and came and apologised, having held that for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's what I said, because I know that's the only seed I could plant, because that'll sit and grow and fester perhaps.
It will.
Oh shit, I remember how bad I felt for shunning him before, and now I'm going to shun him again, and I'm choosing to as an adult. Good luck with that.
It's a big one.
Yeah. But all I can do is present information and then sit back and then hold space and say, if ever you come back out, which I've said, no judgment, I'll be there.
And just be there. Compassion, love. That's all you can do.
And I think instead of shouting at that person and getting angry and saying, well, I've invested all this time in you and I've helped you with this and I told you that and you should know, there's no point in that.
No, there isn't.
The best thing to do is to go, okay, with love, send you on your way. I'm not going to tell you that I feel that I'll ever be happy with you, with what you've done, because like, it's like you're an ex-junkie going back on the smack. I know it's smack. I'm not going to pretend it's not smack.
Yeah, definitely.
So I can't do that. Like, I help people leave cults. I'm not going to pretend someone rejoining a cult is a good thing.
No.
I can't do that. But what I can do is hold space for that person.
Absolutely.
And that's my advice to everybody. Hold space, be the example, work on yourself.
Yeah.
Don't get trapped in the ego.
It's a great message.
And just help where you can. And if they say stuff, let it go. Like, try and be the one that shows that discipline, shows that peace. If you descend into argument and you're shouting, recognise in that moment you've lost.
Absolutely.
On anything, if you're shouting, you've lost.
Yeah. Respond instead of react.
Aye. And let them, defend their right to have an opinion that's different from yours. Defend their right. It might be wrong and you might know it's bullshit, but they're a sovereign soul and it's their karmic journey.
Absolutely.
So let them live it. If you present them with information and they choose not to take it, that's their choice. That's also their karma. And if you present it in a good way, in a nice way, and they don't accept it, you're absolved of all guilt.
That's right.
It's nothing to do with your karma. You can be upset about it, but don't carry any karmic debt over it. It's not for you.
That's right.
I was talking on that karmic debt thing, I was talking to a friend of mine in the last few days, and she said, with the big stuff that's coming, in the next few years, what advice do you give? Because I don't feel like I'm ready. I don't feel like I'm prepared enough.
It's a good point you brought this up, because there was a couple of people from the festival, because you had a half an hour slot and you were talking about what's in the stars, and people were saying, can you get Chris on a podcast, because we'd like to know a little bit more.
So I'm not one for predictions.
No.
And the future is full of potentials. But as mentioned earlier on, we saw back in 2012 that there was nothing spectacular going to happen on a global scale then. But the astrology did suggest that 2020 would be an interesting year.
Yeah.
So there are other interesting years coming up. But I guess every year's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
In its own way. I take great solace in the fact that, or the understanding, it might not be a fact, but my understanding, that I'm an eternal soul, and I chose to come here at this time to have this experience, to help out in any way I can, and to be the change that I want to see. So I can only work on myself. I can only do that. I can look at astrology and these other things to help me, and as a studier of esoteric mysticism, one of the tools that you're given is astrology to know thyself, to learn about yourself. So I use it for specifically that purpose, to know myself and to understand myself. And when I teach about astrology, I teach people how to know themselves. I ain't doing your chart for you, but I'll show you how to do your chart and how to understand it, and then you can spend the next 20 years picking it apart and looking at yourself. So that's the kind of thing. But in understanding the mechanics and the basics of astrology, you can then look at events and things for yourself as they come up in the future, if you want to.
Right.
As one of the planets or whatever, as they cross from one sign into another or one house into another, this is called a transit. And as they transit from one into another, it can be quite a spectacular moment in your life. So if you look at the transits of particularly the slow-moving planets, go out to Neptune and Uranus and look at and Pluto as well. If you look at the symbolism of them, what do they mean? Like for me, Pluto's quite dominant in my chart. It's quite close to the sun, and it crosses the line that's called the ascendant, which is the horizon line.
Right.
If you imagine the zodiac a circle divided into 12 pizza slices.
Yeah.
Each time it goes from one slice into another, crossing that line, that's the transit. And that's the energy of that previous one. Maybe it was family, homely stuff. And the next one's about business.
Okay.
So whatever your sun is going into that changes it from family style frequency to business style frequency. And that crossing point is where you notice a change. So we can look at major crossing points in our life. What is the starting position of these planets? So Pluto is planet of hidden things. We can't see it. So it's deep in space, deep mysteries, hidden things, spirituality as well.
Right.
It's quite close to my sun, so it's going to affect my life of being mystical stuff, spirituality, which is proven to be the case.
Yeah.
So Pluto takes 256 years to do one orbit of the sun. So for it to go back to its starting position, you're going to have to live a long time for it to go back to its starting position in your chart.
Yeah.
But you look at where it was at the beginning of your chart and you watch it progress through the years, you can see different crossing points based on your chart, and you can see, right, well, there's going to be a big spiritual change based on deep stuff then. So crossing from one section to the next is a big thing. But if it's on the horizon line and it comes down one way and goes up the other, so the bit where it's coming up is the ascendant and the descendant.
Okay.
So to cross the ascendant line or the descendant is a bit more powerful than the other
Than the
sections.
slices themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
So looking at my astrology, I found that I had a big crossing of Pluto in 2016.
Right.
And in fact, Pluto crossed my ascendant line 3 times. It went forward normal, then it prograde, and then it went retrograde, and then it went prograde again, And during that time, it crossed the ascendant, recrossed the ascendant, recrossed the ascendant.
Right.
My life turned upside down in that 9 months. February 2016 to winter solstice 2016. My life turned around, turned upside down. Yeah, completely changed. I knew it was coming because I saw it coming in 2012.
Okay.
Sitting with my personal astrologer, looking at stuff and going, oh. And we cast forward a bit and he said, well, Chris, I'm looking forward to whatever's going on for you in 2016. It's going to be a fucking wild ride. And so it proved to be. We didn't know the specifics.
Yeah, sure.
I do now, but I didn't know before. But you can learn what's coming. So you can do that for the world.
Okay.
You can do that for a country.
Yeah.
So if you know the definitive date that a country started, like for the USA, the moment that the Declaration of Independence was drawn up and signed. So that would be the birth date of the USA.
Okay.
You can do a birth chart for that, and then you can cast forward to see when the USA is going to have big crossing points and big events. Right. So you can do it for the world as well. And then there's just a general thing as things are moving about in astrology. So it becomes quite complex.
I can imagine.
Very complicated.
Yeah.
So what's coming? I don't know specifically.
No.
I could give my own ideas, but then they're only my ideas, and I wouldn't want people to walk around with them.
Yeah, and to hold on to that as a definite.
Get your own opinion. Go and have a look for yourself. What I will say is, and I'm happy to say, the next few years are going to be intense.
Mm-hmm.
Next year looks to be quite an intense one.
Yeah.
Different from 2020, but of its own level of intensity. And the next 3 or 4 years after that, again, some powerful experiences for the world. I would be very surprised if we get to 2030, 7 years from now, one human cycle, and the world is not a completely different place.
Yeah.
So for it to be a completely different place, there has to be either a massive leap or incremental steps. And 3 years ago was a massive leap, but also a whole bunch of incremental steps tied onto it.
Yeah, there was.
So they're going to run it again. They'll do it again. They'll do it differently. But there's so many of the people that are lining up to get their injections.
Yeah.
When my friend said, what can we do and how do I stop being fearful? I said a couple of things that gives me solace. I believe we chose to come here. So that's encouraging. We chose to be here at this time. I also believe as a practitioner of practical magic, so not sleight of hand stuff, but like using magic properly, and not Harry Potter either.
No.
Like practical magic. So one of the tenets of practical magic is you must get approval from the people that if you're doing any magic with them.
Yeah.
You must know about it. And if you don't, then karmically it's sitting on your shoulders.
Yeah.
So the global elite use dark magic. 100% they use dark magic.
Yeah, sure.
They've got dark magic practitioners of a high skill set out there. You look at the calendar of events. You know, why did they say the 23rd?
They always do it on the dates.
Right?
Yeah.
322 is the big number for the Skull and Bone Society.
That's right, yeah.
322 in American way is the 22nd of March.
Yeah.
It's the spring equinox, the start of the year.
Yeah.
It's within that field. So they use this. Now, the Cabal, or if we can call it that, they need our approval for their own karmic debt.
That's right.
They believe. They need our approval. So they'll put something out through the media, through movies, through television, through your favourite soap opera, get these opinions put out, and they're telling you, we're going to do X. So you then have a choice. You can say, I don't allow this. I say no. I remove any right that you have to do that. And then there's doing nothing. It's going, well, what can I do? It's the government. You know, they'll do what they want anyway. But by doing nothing, you've not said no.
That's
and they
correct.
take that as tacit approval. So they put it out, they do it, we say nothing, we've given their approval. And they're doing that all the time. And they have to do that. You look at what they've done, look at 9/11 stuff, look at everything.
Gosh, yeah.
It's all promoted beforehand, and they tell you what they're going to do, and then they do it.
Yeah.
It's maybe subtly woven into movies and so on, but they still tell you that they're going to do it. So we remove that approval, and we make sure we never bend the knee. We never get down in front of these people and apologize and say we're going to do stuff. And we don't sit quietly. There is compliance in your silence. You got to say stuff. You got to speak up. You got to stand up for it and stand tall and be willing, like, to take it on the chin. Like, you got to just stand tall and say no. That's so important.
Do not consent.
Do not consent. So then, we're in communities, we're in groups, we're in spaces of our own. Because we've not given them that power, they'll let us go. They'll leave us. They have to. Now, as I said, they tell us things in the movies and TV and media, and the propaganda machine rolls on and does its job very well. If you look at the post-apocalyptic movies and books and so on, there's always a subculture. They're usually living in the sewers.
That's right.
There's always a subculture. They've got shitty clothes that are all dirty. They're living in the sewers.
That's right.
They're scrabbling, they're eating rats on a stick and all that stuff.
Demolition Man.
Right, exactly this. And The Matrix. But look at that bit in The Matrix. I'm not sure which film it is, but it's the one where he gets to speak to the architect. The guy in the suit, the white beard. He's like God.
That's right.
The creator of the
creator of the game.
And he speaks to him, and the architect says, this is the 6th or 7th or whatever Matrix it is, and we initially made it to be perfect, but it kept fucking up. And so we've made it with a flaw, and now it runs like a sweet dream. And that's because there's a you. There's space for the doubters.
Yeah. Space
for the folk who want to break away. They know that.
Yeah, the anomaly.
They know that. They know that they have to create room for the rebels in society, which means they have to allow the rebel society to form for those who are born into their society, who become rebellious, to have an outlet for them to escape to.
Yeah.
And we'll be painted outside this AI-driven smart city, 15-minute city. You're integrated with AI stuff where, we're these tillers of the earth. We're like hobbits out there. We're simple-minded.
Exactly, yeah.
So there's a faux blog post written by one of the World Economic Forum global young leaders about life in 2030.
That's right.
Pretending to be in 2030, and how he looks around and says, it's great, I don't have a house to live in, I don't have a car, I don't own any possessions, and I'm so happy, and I'm 15-minute city, and Jackson's like, I love it. But he mentions in this, and this is written by one of Klaus Schwab's minions, he mentions, there's those people who didn't come with us. They didn't want to be integrated with AI. They didn't want this wonderful health and technology stuff that we've got, and blah, 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 blah. So they're out there, living like hobbits, tilling the earth. Like, so you're giving us room. Because you have to give us room. You have to give room. So that's encouraging, and that's what I said.
It is encouraging.
Yeah, learn something, learn a trade, learn a skill, become a forager. Do things that helps you understand how to survive.
Yeah.
Learn the basics. Learn how to build a fire. Learn how to gather wood. Learn how to get your food, for foraging, for hunting, for all those things. Get in and work in communities. If you don't understand that skill set, then become part of the community. That you've got the carpenters and the joiners, and then you've got the cooks, and then you've got the foragers, and then the hunters, and so they're bringing in food, they're helping cook the food, they're helping build the shelter so that we can eat the food. Survival on our own, we can survive if you've got enough skills and being able to create the things that you need in a natural environment, catch your fish and get your herbs and your plants to survive. We can do that as individuals. But what's very, very rare is the ability to thrive. We do that as a group. We do that together. So alone, we survive, maybe. Together, we thrive, definitely. So we need to do that. We need to come together. We need to realise it's okay for you to be different. Because really, the differences in opinion is just whether you like one football team or another.
Yeah, of course it is.
Or you like this
That's
type
all
of
it
music
is.
compared to that type of music.
It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
That's it. That is it. Ultimately, I'll defend your right to like this football team and like this kind of music, and I don't like either. But that's okay, because I want mine defended. I can like what I like and listen to what I listen to and believe what I believe. That's important. And dispelling mistruths. For example, you hinted at Russell Brand and the stuff that's come up with him.
Yeah,
it's all opinion, but my understanding, looking at it from an esoteric, occultist, the mysticism side, is the man is there as a Pied Piper, just as his book says.
As he says.
Just as he was in the 2012 Olympics at the closing ceremony, where he was like the child catcher, Pied Piper. That was a weird thing. And he was after the bit where all the kids in the hospital beds with the masks on, with the different flags showing what...
And the Boris Johnson popping up and all.
Right, with the COVID puppets. So his bit came after that, which is what's happened. I believe that he's a tool of the elite. And what's happened in this last few weeks is what's called a humiliation ritual.
Yeah. Right.
So there's twofold purpose. One, you have to prove yourself and go through this humiliation ritual so that you can prove that you're worthy. And secondly, as somebody who's been put into the awakened community to help, supposedly, there are many who don't believe that. So now that he's been absolutely demolished by the mainstream, he can legitimately step up and go, I'm not part of them. Look how they fucked me. They hate me. Yeah. They've come against me. They don't like me. I'm one of you guys.
Well, you can see it with a few, can't you? Elon Musk's of the world, and they're all playing the game. It's a game. Yeah,
it is all a game.
Step out the game a bit though, and you can see it a little bit clearer.
Or
because if you're in fighting, you're just going to keep fighting.
Yeah.
And you're fighting, actually, you become the beast that you're fighting.
Yeah, I know. Well, they say that, and like I do a bit of healing for people in places and situations, and sometimes facing some fairly weird stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
And I don't do it that often, because the more you stare at the darkness, the longer the darkness is staring at you. So don't do that. Stare at the light for a while.
Yeah.
Look at the positive stuff. Don't look at everything as a conspiracy. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Recognise we're talking on these things and able to communicate through technology because of science. People have
without a doubt.
I've done experiments, I've created things.
Like you were saying before, there's good and bad. And without the good, you don't recognise. Without the bad, you don't recognise the good. There has to be both.
Yeah. I can see why people would throw so many things out as they start to wake up and they go, shit, I've been lied to about all of that. So why should this be true?
I get it. Yeah,
and they start throwing things out. But then that becomes a dangerous place, like the flat earth one, where too little information on a subject can take you to that point where you think you're an expert. And it's like, well, actually, no, we just need to give you these other bits of information and look at the foundation stones. Look at what it's built on. The arguments that I see for that and other, what I see as Psyop, like conspiracy theories, is they're there to deviate your mind away. They're there to fill your time.
Yeah, of course it is.
To take
and it does do.
Yeah.
You go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and your attention is your currency. So what you're paying, whatever you pay your attention to grows.
That's right.
So if you're just constantly fighting this beast is going to grow.
Yeah. So don't give it that much time. by all means, look
be
and
aware.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah, no, be aware.
Yeah.
But let's have a look at how are you feeling in your life? Are you happy in your life? Because once you start getting happy, the world's going to get happier.
It is. You have to recognise the fact, and we have to understand and recognise the fact that going through something like this is a major trauma.
It's massive trauma, of course
it's PTSD inducing,
Yes.
it's the isolation and all
But
that
this is
stuff.
where we're here to help.
Right. So it's understandable that you would throw everything out, but we shouldn't throw everything out. We don't necessarily need to trust the government. I certainly don't. I don't believe a word of what they're saying.
No, absolutely not.
But I do believe certain things about science because, well, I've gone and looked and gone checked. We are scientists. You do an experiment, you're a scientist.
Yeah.
You repeat someone else's, you're a scientist. So it's not this great machine. There is loads of trauma and there's loads of shit in science.
Oh, we could probably talk about this in a full podcast,
Probably
in itself.
could, yeah,
It's like the system, you're fighting a system,
Yeah.
but there's good and bad in the system.
Yes.
There's elements of the system which helps a lot of people.
Okay.
Not saying that we shouldn't stand against the bad because we should.
Yeah. It's getting that balance.
It's getting a balance, It's getting a balance. But we were, and I get it because I was in the middle of it and I lost everything because of it. And I don't regret any of that, by the way. We were under a lot of attack, a big attack. And if that attack comes, like you were saying, something big's going to come, I'm very confident in the human spirit.
Yeah.
That, no matter what differences are happening and playing out right now, the human spirit will join us together if it's needed.
Yes.
I believe that.
Yes. And as much as I'm not one for predicting the future, there are some interesting prophecies around the world
Okay.
that I like to keep abreast of and,
Yeah.
very much up for interpretation.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting prophecy coming out of one of the American tribes, which talks about the people with one heart and the people with two hearts. So the space is originally filled with people of one heart. And then these two heart people start appearing. And you can become a two heart person if you started out as a one heart. In fact, the two heart people, they encourage it because they don't like it if you're different from them. They want you to have two hearts. And it comes to the point where they're forcing and giving the one-hearted people a choice. You can either take on this second heart or you can go.
Right.
And so there's a split in their society, and some of the one-heart people, they go to be tillers of the earth, wouldn't you know? Right? And the two-heart people, they grow and they grow and they grow and they grow on so much that they implode. And eventually they wipe themselves out. And it's just the one-hearted people that are left again. But during that time that they're growing, there is persecution and trauma.
Yeah.
Now, there's different ways to interpret all these things, and I could be wrong. But I quite like this one.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps that what that one's referring to in our day is transhumanism and the adoption of AI and the integration of that to us. Because if you stick a chip in your body that needs a battery, you've got two beats going in your body. You've got your own heartbeat and you've got this other digital pulse, the second heart.
Yeah.
The two heart people. So those of us who won't take an implant and stay away from that, we're the one hearts. We go back to the earth. We go back to that space where we're cut out from their society, which is why we need the unity, why we need to step away from all these traumas and, you know, having differences of opinion that cause us to split apart. Like, encourage and welcome the differences of opinion because we need to be standing tall and have a community that we can rely on. And for those that when they do wake up, that we're there for them.
Yeah.
We need to be ready.
We do.
And it's not like we don't know that it's coming. We've seen it. It's not like this is some philosophical discussion in the mid-90s talking about the potential of a global cataclysm that's brought on by the governments in a fake vaccine or a fake flu that brings in vaccines and control and so on, we'd have got laughed out. But today, everybody knows. Like, it's happened. So is it going to happen again? Absolutely. Will it be like 2020? No, it'll be slightly different. Will it be a bit worse?
Could be.
Maybe. I suspect it'll last a bit longer.
Yeah.
I suspect it'll be like this was the trailer. See how you cope with that, and we'll set it back, let you build up a bit of fear and anxiety about it, also inject you with all this stuff that seems to be changing people. I know of a couple of people who've had 1 or 2 jags, and it's like they're a different person. They've changed, like it's weird. So they're changing folk. So we just need to...
No, we need to be aware.
Aye.
But again, you got to go within again.
That's it, yeah.
You have to go within.
Yeah.
We can't... If you keep fighting and fighting, you're going to have nothing left.
Focus on the good. Feed the good wolf that's inside you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't mean to say that we don't recognise and understand that there's this stuff out here, but we don't need to face it all the time. Acknowledge it, but that's like standing on the beach and the water's just been pulled out and there's 100-foot tsunami. Now all the rest of your family, they're facing up the beach, looking at the lovely palm trees, so they can't see. You're standing looking at this wall of water. Now what do? Do you start shouting and screaming and keep looking at the water and keep looking at the darkness? Because you ain't getting yourself out of that hole.
No.
You've got to be the example. Don't run along the line of your family and friends screaming at them that they need to run, because you're not running away. You're running along their line. You're still there. You're still in the sand. When that wave comes in, you're fucked. So be the example. Run off the sand. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them, turn right. By the way, don't believe me. Turn round.
Yeah, exactly.
Look for yourself. But giving them the personal example of you running off and up the sand and up on the beach and then getting up to the highest point you can get, that's shown them. You've demonstrated it. You've not stood there and preached at them. You've recognised the danger. You've not got your back to it the way they have. You've faced it. You've acknowledged it. You've said to people around you, you need to do this. And by the way, I'm not staying. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
You can come or you can not, but I'm doing it. It's up to you. And then you should set the example.
Be the inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So where can people see you, Chris? You're going to be up and down the country for the foreseeable, doing your healing and at festivals. That's what you kind of do nowadays.
Festival season's kind of finished for the year. We run, myself and my partner, we run our own retreats on a regular basis. We hire venues up and down the country to do our sound baths.
Lovely.
And I'm just looking at doing a sound bath at the end of October, probably just outside Leeds.
Okay.
And I'm looking to do one in Lincoln and a few other places in the Midlands.
Nice.
I have been drawn to Middle England, and I didn't think I would end up in Middle England, but it's quite the hot spot and quite the energy place. So doing some online stuff. My partner and I are just about to release some music as well. We sing our own songs that are spiritual awakening, healing songs.
Yeah.
And we go around doing our sound baths and other healing work around the country regularly. So get in touch. I have a website. Our band, our music, our creative space is called Pan Tonal.
Okay.
We play the hand pans. So, and pan means universal. So.
Okay.
Pantonalcreations.com, I think.
Well, send me the link and I'll put it in the description so people
or add me on Facebook and send me a message, and
I'm
always happy to talk. But be prepared for voice notes because I don't type.
Yeah, well, you might get a few going, what's going on?
Maybe 1 or 2, and I'll gladly talk to anybody.
Oh, well, thanks for your time. Again, appreciate your time, Chris, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon enough.
Be glad to come back and talk to you.
Thank
Cheers,
you,
man.
mate.
Thanks for having me.